guys, just a word of warning. This week the podcast didn't turn out like I wanted. I ended up accidentally clicking end before it was all the way over with, so it's technically not a podcast, I guess, anymore. It's more of a just review, but it's still Drama Llama Hump Day Episode 2. So I hope you guys still enjoy. If you don't, sorry. If there's anything I can do to improve, please let me know, because I'd really like to improve this. I'd really like to get this to where it's at a understandable quality, where it's at a good quality. Thank you so much, and peace. Welcome to the Drama Llama Hump Day Podcast, Episode 2. Now, you may be wondering, well, where have I been? Where have you been, Johnny? Well, I will tell you where I've been. I have been working. So, basically in the last year, I got a job. I started working at a grocery store, because I felt like I needed to contribute during the pandemic. Sadly, with work and just the way things have been with the pandemic and different things going on in my personal life, I haven't really been able to focus on theater very much. Sadly, the world of theater has been shut down anyway for the last year. Thankfully, finally, Broadway is opening back up. And all these musicals, these lovely musicals that got delayed, postponed, all this, they're finally happening. They're finally going through. Before I go any further, I would just like to give you a little bit of a story as to why I decided to get back into this. So, for about a year, from like March to about from March of last year till, not March, almost right after this podcast came out, till about May of this year, I was kind of like thinking that I was done with theater. That I was done with acting. However, in May of this year, it was announced that for the first time in over a year, there would be a live theater show which would have audience attendance. And it was announced that the auditions for that would be at the end of May. I was unsure at the time if I really wanted to do this, if I really wanted to get back into theater. However, after a lot of self-discussion, I decided, what the hell, I'll try it. So, I auditioned for the show, ended up getting cast as the bartender in a lovely show called Picasso at La Panagile. It's very French. It is a comedy that was written by Steve Martin before he got big into stand-up comedy and things like that. Now, while going through Picasso, while doing rehearsals and things like that, I started to, not fall in love with again, but I started to remember why I love live theater so much. And that's why I decided I would try to get back into this. For months, however, after the show, I kind of was lacking the material to really get back into this show. Sure, I could tell the story about how I got back into it, but that's done and over with, and we've only got 4 minutes in. But after thinking about it for a while, I decided that I would do feature musical reviews. Which brings me to what I did over the last 2 days. Over the last 2 days, I put out a poll on Facebook and Snapchat. My goodness. And that poll yielded some very interesting results. I asked a couple of different groups on Facebook what their favorite Halloween musical was. And I got close to about 30 responses from different people. I also asked my coworkers at work what their favorite Halloween musicals are. And they also gave me their answers. So, just to run down what all got commented in that poll. I got Little Shop of Horrors, Beetlejuice, Phantom of the Opera, Evil Dead, Addams Family, Jekyll and Hyde, Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, Rocky Horror Picture Show, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and a little-known musical called Repo. Don't know what it is. Would love to see it. So, out of all of those, I decided to pick the top 4, and every Wednesday on the Drama Llama Hump Day podcast, except for this one here, me and my co-host, Nathan, will go through our little small form, or not small form, what am I saying? Our long form reviews of these musicals. So the first one, or in first place, I should explain also, the top 4 I will be doing in ascending order. So, I'm going to start with the 4th favorite, then the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. However, I will announce it in descending order. God, that's confusing. I'm sorry about that. But, the first place, in first place, with 10 votes. Can you take a guess? If you guessed Rocky Horror Picture Show, you are correct. I don't know why. I mean, I know why. It's a cult favorite. It's a good musical. Not really. It doesn't really follow the musical format, but it's just so wild, crazy, and fun that you love it. You gotta love it. I personally love it live more than I do the original Rocky Horror Picture Show, even though no one will ever top Tim Curry as Frankenfurter. Changed my mind. Anyway, second place with 9 votes was Beetlejuice the Musical. I've been wanting a reason to finally get to see this musical, and thankfully I've been given that reason. I've heard that Beetlejuice is a very good musical, and I would love to have that proven correct to me. In third place, with 8 votes, was Little Shop of Horrors. Little Shop of Horrors. I don't even know if that's the song in the musical. I just remember having that tune stuck in my head for a long, long time. It's been forever since I've watched Little Shop of Horrors. I loved it whenever I watched it. I've only ever seen the movie versions of it. And I personally love the dark ending of Little Shop of Horrors, where Audrey 2 spawns a bunch of other counterparts, and they all take over the world. The musical literally ending, well, yeah, I can't say that. I'm sorry. If you've never seen it, Spoiler alert, sorry. If you haven't seen it though, what are you doing? And fourth, and finally, with 7 votes, was Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. I love Sweeney Todd. Okay, but I'd only ever seen the Johnny Depp version. The one that's, very sinister, dark, macabre, doesn't have a lot of room for happiness or laughter, doesn't really go into comedy at all. So that's what I was expecting when I decided to watch the 1982 filmed live for TV broadcast of the Broadway version of Sweeney Todd. And I was pleasantly surprised that it's funny. It's really funny. Like, it's also deeply unsettling, which is the thing I like about Sweeney Todd. But the way they blend the unsettling nature of Sweeney Todd with the comedy of not only Mrs. Lovett, but just the different characters that surround Sweeney Todd, the different scenarios he's put in, it's beautiful. So, without further ado, I'm going to go into my notes that I had while watching Sweeney Todd. So, the first thing I notice is the prelude. In the prelude, they show you a banner that I couldn't really make out what it was. I think it was supposed to be a map of some sort. But they're showing it to a very unsettling, my bad, didn't mean to get that close to the camera, to a very unsettling melody in the background. And just the way that it plays out, the way that Sondheim wrote it, it's just so perfect. It sets the macabre tone of the musical perfectly. The lights come up on the sheet, and as they do, you see 2 people walk out, grab it, and yank it down. And as they do, this loud screech echoes out throughout the auditorium. And it just really exemplifies the horror of Sweeney Todd. So, Act 1, Scene 1 begins right after the prelude. The prelude literally goes straight into the first song, The Ballad of Sweeney Todd. When the lights come up, it reveals the citizens of London hearkening the arrival of the murderous Sweeney Todd. The setting is a rundown and dismal alleyway of London. At least, that's what it looked like to me. The set is very dingy. It's very dirty, dusty. It looks disheveled, is what I'm trying to say. So, the citizens of London start going into this chorus about the legend of Sweeney Todd, and about how anyone who entered his barber shop never exited. Which isn't true, but it does set the tone very well for what Sweeney Todd is. Sweeney Todd then himself enters the fray and starts building up hype for his story. He actually kind of breaks the fourth wall and says that Sweeney wouldn't want his story being given away right at the beginning, which I found hilarious, because that's... You gotta think that's probably Sondheim writing to the audience from himself. coming through Sweeney Todd, the character. Which, I know that sounds all sorts of, like, why is that funny? But just to me, that's funny. Because I like it whenever I see a joke from the author straight to the audience. And you can tell that the author is writing through a character to the audience. I don't like it whenever a character does that a whole lot. But when they do it in moderation, magnifique. Scene 2 opens on a harbor in London. Anthony, a young sailor boy, sings of the joys of living in London in our second song of the film and musical, No Place Like London. And as Anthony is being all genuine and sweet, Sweeney Todd from behind him chimes in, "There's no place like London." And Anthony kind of looks back at him and is like, what are you talking about? And Todd goes, and Todd remarks that Anthony is young and that he's never had to deal with the cruelness of the world. And that he will learn. As Sweeney attempts to leave, a beggar appears, and after getting money from Anthony, proceeds to flaunt her stuff and offers services to Anthony. In the first parts of this, this would become a running joke throughout the rest of the musical, at least throughout the rest of the first act. That the beggar appears, she starts out by asking for money, and then proceeds to start flaunting her stuff to Anthony and asking if he wants to, I think one of the terms she used was split her muff. She walks over to Sweeney Todd and claims that she recognizes his face. Sweeney dismisses her. She then starts offering her services to Sweeney Todd, and he chases her off. Anthony attempts to accompany Sweeney, and Sweeney shares his true thoughts, that the hierarchy of London are vermin, finishing with another sarcastic, "No place like London." Anthony appears confused and concerned, so Sweeney indirectly tells his story. The scene, the ending of this scene, with the beggar offering services to Sweeney, at first it seems like a really funny joke, how he just kind of dismisses her, but by the end of the show, it takes on a whole different meaning for anyone who's seen it, but we're not quite there yet. So, this cuts into song number 3, Barber and His Wife. It tells of the tragic backstory of the barber and his beautiful wife, who is taken from her husband by a man of the law. We learn later that this man of the law who took her is actually Beadle Bamford, the crooked police officer who is the henchman to Judge Turpin, the also very corrupt judge of the city of London. As Anthony and Sweeney part, Sweeney ends the scene with a rhythmic soliloquy, likening London to a pit with people who are filled with shit, and states that the vermin of the world inhabit it. Again, Sondheim is so good at this, doing these very quick rhythmic patterns, because Uh, if I remember correctly, the exact lines are, there's a hole in the world and it's like a pit, and the people of the world are filled. But the people of the world who are filled with shit, and the vermin of the world inhabit it. The way that he just has those quick rhythmic rhymes. That's something that I've always loved about Stephen Sondheim. So Sweeney steps inside of a door that leads into the city of London. And as he does, the loud screech we heard at the end of the prelude echoes throughout the stage once again. Scene number 3. It is set inside Mrs. Lovett's pie shop. Sweeney enters and is offered a pie, but is warned that the pies are the worst pies in London, bringing us to song number 4, a very hilarious song about the crap pies that Mrs. Lovett makes. The song is dedicating to describing the meat shortage that Mrs. Lovett's pie shop is experiencing, and that her pies are horrible because of the substitutions she's using. The substitutions she recounts are mainly dead cats. That's horrible, but it gets way worse. If you've ever seen Sweeney Todd, you know it gets way worse. But we're not there yet. Side note, throughout the song, Mrs. Lovett is prepping dough for her next batch. And in typical Sondheim fashion, there is little breathing room, as song 4 begins seconds later. In a stroke of Sondheim mastery, Mrs. Lovett echoes Barber and his wife, calling the barber beautiful over his wife, and telling of his transport for life, which essentially means he was arrested and sent away for life. For loving someone who is loved by someone above him. Once again, re-emphasizing that Sweeney Todd was sent away because Judge Turpin loved his wife. And that because Judge Turpin loved his wife, Sweeney had to be taken out of the picture. The story of what happened is visually shown atop Mrs. Lovett's pie shop, where the former barbershop of Benjamin Barker is. The wife is accosted by Judge Turpin at a ball, and Sweeney asks if anyone had mercy on her. Mrs. Lovett realizes that Sweeney is Benjamin Barker, and tells him that his wife poisoned herself, and Judge Turpin kept his daughter, Johanna, for himself. Sweeney, broken, states his thirst for revenge, as Lovett kind of mocks him. She kind of tells him that, how are you, a lowly prison boy, going to get back at a judge, a man of the law, a man who, if he recognizes you, sends you straight back or straight to the gallows, one of the two. She then gets the idea to where was I at? Shoot. Okay. So Mrs. Lovett, after mocking him, being like, well, how are you going to get back at the judge? He says, she asks, how are you even going to live? And he says, even if I have to sleep in the sewers, I will have to. Or I will. And Mrs. Lovett pulls out his old shaving equipment, his old barber equipment, says, you don't have to sleep in a sewer. You can become a barber once again. Hands him a straight razor. And this takes us into song number 5, My Friends. Sweeney reunites with his straight razor, his preferred weapon of choice, his preferred tool of choice, and completely ignores Mrs. Lovett as she calls him a friend. He finds a clever way of describing the murder his razor will bring. He talks about how his razor will soon be spilling a new kind of ruby, meaning that he's going to be slitting people's throats, obviously. The song ends with the harrowing warnings of the citizens of London, once again echoing the legend of Sweeney Todd. The unsettling music is undercut with the sound of finches chirping as the scene transitions immediately to Scene 4. Scene 4 begins with Johanna atop the stairs at her house. And she sees that there are some birds that a bird salesman are selling. She starts tending to the birds. She starts, talking to the birds. Kind of batty. This takes us into song number 6, Greenfinch and Linnet Bird. Johanna relates the singing of the birds to her own cries from her cage, which is her house, and her messed up relationship with her surrogate father, or not surrogate, but her adopted father. Song number 7 begins immediately after that. I also have a side note here that Johanna's performance is very operatic, which I'm not a huge fan of operatic solos, but I know that they are a key crucial part to musical theater in certain aspects. It's just not my cup of tea. I didn't really like this part of I didn't really like this song. I like what the meaning of it is, and I like how it kind of foreshadows what will later happen to Johanna, which, again, Stephen Sondheim is masterful. He is a master at not only foreshadowing, but building suspense and things like that. He is Daddy Sondheim. Song number 7 begins, and is called Ah Miss. Anthony catches a glimpse of Johanna and sings a very typical Notice Me song. As Johanna continues to sing Greenfinch and Linnet Bird. The beggar then appears once again, begging for money from a nice young man. And then Anthony asks her about whose this house this is. And she tells Anthony that the house is Judge Turbott's, and that the girl is his daughter, and that anyone who dares to try to get the hand of his daughter is a foolish man indeed. We soon find out why that is. This is the honestly most messed up thing about the musical, is the relationship between Judge Turbot and his daughter. Okay. Then the beggar, as she is warning him about the dangers of going after Johanna, walks over and taps him on the Peter, on his nether region. Kind of, basically sexually assaults him. And once again, gets services offered. She pulls up her skirt and, does everything except for full-on flashing him. I wrote a side note at this point that Sweeney Todd better eventually this woman. Which, later in the musical, I feel so bad about writing. But not right now because, tapping him on the peen when he didn't want it. An unwanted sexual advance. Anthony shakes this off, and he goes to buy a bird for Johanna. He takes the bird up to Johanna, and then promises to steal her away from her cage. Her father walks up and threatens Anthony. And Judge Turbot, Johanna's supposed father, the one that everyone knows as her father, implies that he is aroused by the dress that she is wearing. Like I said, this is the honest-to-God worst part of this musical. Anthony finished his song rather creepily, because he says that he is at her window, he is by her, he is buried in her golden hair, which is all supposed to be lovey-dovey, but especially in today's sense, that's very freaking creepy. And as he ends the song, a loud screech reverberates throughout the auditorium once again, signaling that we are returning to Mr. Sweeney Todd. Scene 5. The scene is set on a street outside of the barber Pirelli's traveling wagon. Sweeney puts his plan to gain the selected customers in motion. But first, a young servant boy named, later we will find out his name is Tobias, tries to sell Pirelli's miracle tonic for curing baldness. Swindles quite a few patrons into buying it. He tries to sell to Sweeney, who opens it up, takes a sniff, and says, "It smells like piss. I think it's piss. Yep, it's piss." Which that just made me laugh. It's not something that, if you've ever watched the Johnny Depp version, you don't have these moments of laughter like this. Because Johnny Depp just plays such a disturbing version of Sweeney Todd. He doesn't give you a chance. He doesn't give you a chance to really laugh at him because of just the way that he plays his characters. Pirelli then comes out of his wagon and is pissed off. So Sweeney insults his business to his face, calls him a fraud, and challenges him to a shave-off. He wagers his razor against £5. So essentially, back then, a £5 bet would, in today's day and age, be worth a £597 bet. That's over $700 in today's money. Like, that's mind-blowing. So, we cut to song number 10, The Contest. And I think this scene right here is probably one of my favorite. This particular song right here is one of my favorite of the show because Pirelli can't focus on his job. He kind of smacks the shaving cream all over his customer's face, and then Pirelli, he acts so confident. He's like, it's with the stroke of a hand and the flick of a wrist and all sorts of stuff like that. And as he does, he's like going like this at the dude's face, and you just see the dude wince every time he does. Eventually, the dude slumps down in his chair from how many times Pirelli has nicked him. Sweeney hasn't even begun yet. He's still sharpening his blade. This continues for a bit, while Pirelli is going on and on about how to properly shave. Sweeney, after sharpening his knife, or his blade, puts the shaving cream on his customer, and in a matter of seconds, has him shaved. Sweeney wins. And Pirelli is cross, very upset about this. Pirelli acts like he's all, okay, and he's fine. And he walks into his wagon, and as he does, he shouts at Tobias, saying that they need to get out of there. At this point, Beetle Bamford walks up, and he asks Sweeney Todd about his establishment. And Sweeney promises him that he will get the closest shave of his life. A screech ends the scene as the citizens of London give another exposition about Sweeney's traps that he has set. I think what they're referring to in that, because it doesn't actually say what they're referring to, but I think it's the trapdoor that he sets up that is right in front of his barber chair, which is where he shoves his barber chair over and the body drops into the basement of Mrs. Lovett's pie shop. However, it doesn't really make sense that trap would be set here, because by this point, Mrs. Lovett doesn't have the plan in motion to, do what she does with the bodies. Scene 6. The beggar tries to get a pie out of Mrs. Lovett, and Mrs. Lovett runs her off. It's weird. Okay, so, excuse me again, I'm getting cramps. It's weird because you wonder at first why Mrs. Lovett is so disdainful to the beggar. Like, Sweeney Todd walked up, and she didn't know that it was him. She didn't know that it was Benjamin Barker, and she was offering him a free pie. Meanwhile, this beggar walks up and begs for a pie, and she just kind of rushes her off. Later, it becomes apparent why. So, song number 11. Sweeney grows impatient, waiting for Beetle Bamford to show up. Mrs. Lovett suggests decorating and waiting. And Sweeney, once again, ignores her the entire time, and continues plotting Beetle's demise. The whole song is her talking to Sweeney and him just looking forward at the audience or looking away from her, not purposefully, just giving her no mind, no attention. It's at this point that Anthony visits Sweeney and reveals, accidentally, that he loves Sweeney's daughter. Lovett is happy, Sweeney is displeased. Lovett suggests that Anthony bring Johanna to the barbershop to hide from her would-be suitor, known father. And then suggests to Sweeney that if he is getting tired of waiting for Beetle Bamford, that he should take the available neck to slit, implying that he should kill Anthony. Pirelli then enters Sweeney Todd's barbershop and reveals that he knows that Sweeney Todd is Benjamin Barker, and also reveals that he is an Irishman who used to work for him, and that the Pirelli moniker is all just a guise, a facade, and that he is actually a fraud. He blackmails Sweeney and tells him that he's going to give him a percentage of everything that he earns. He tells Sweeney this. Well, Sweeney then grabs him and chokes him out. And it seems like he's dead. So Sweeney throws him into a little case that he has. Sweeney sends the servant boy, Tobias, comes to check on Mr. Pirelli, but Sweeney sends him downstairs for a free pie and a spot of gin. Sweeney then unsheathes his razor and holds it to the sky as the loud screech reverberates. One more time. The music intensifies, and it shows that Sweeney Todd has finally made first blood. The men of London sing of the doom of Pirelli, Sweeney Todd's very first victim. Scene 7 begins on the steps of the courthouse. After a day in court ends early, because Judge Turpin, quote, can't stand the smell of the people, Judge Turpin announced... I can't do this. Again, I would like to apologize for anyone who this particular part would trigger. But this is part of the musical. Judge Turpin announces to Beetle Bamford his intention to marry his daughter. I'm not trying to play this up. That genuinely makes me sick. And I actually wrote in the side notes here, and this was late at night, and I was trying to get this all done, but I wrote, what a sick old pervert. This is where really the next 3 songs kick in. Kiss Me, Ladies and Their Sensibilities, and the combination of those 2 songs in a quartet. Kiss Me is I wrote here, Kiss Me is a Sondheim through and through. Very quick lyrics, intercut with one very simple word, or one very simple phrase. Kiss me. Again, I can't really do it justice by trying to do any recreation of the lyrics or anything like that. It's just one of those things that you would have to watch, and I strongly suggest you watch it. Because it's a very great... The song Kiss Me is actually a really good song, even though it's one of the biggest simp songs in simpstery. Johanna keeps singing these quick lyrics about her worries of her father, wanting to marry her. And Anthony just wants some sugar. He just wants a kiss. He just wants her to kiss me. I'm terribly sorry if that, reverberated into the mic. He proposes to Johanna, says that they will be married before her father has a chance to marry her, and she accepts. And then they make out on the couch. Ladies and Their Sensibilities is a slower song about how to truly charm a woman. Well, a lady, according to Beetle Bamford, who suggests a trip, Let me try that again. Who suggests to Judge Turpin a trip to Todd's barber shop. Ugh. The two songs combine for a quartet as Johanna and Anthony agree to marry. At the pie shop and barber shop, Todd reveals that he killed Pirelli. Mrs. Lovett is upset, calls him an idiot for doing so. Then he reveals that he was blackmailed, and he was like, and Mrs. Lovett's like, oh, if that's what it was, that's fine. I thought you had really lost your marbles. Like, I love Mrs. Lovett. In this musical here, in this version of the musical, Mrs. Lovett is so good at just making comedic situations out of really horrendous situations, which feels like it should be uncanny, but it just makes it that much better. That it's got this macabre undertone, but there's room to laugh. There's room to have fun. Turpin arrives, and Mrs. Lovett brings the poor merchant boy, poor sales boy, into the basement to give him some more pies and to just make him feel good. Then comes Pretty Woman. Probably the best song in the whole show. The most suspenseful song by far. I actually wrote in the notes here, I said, what a song. Each man sings very similar lyrics, talking about how they love pretty women. Obviously, Todd is talking partly about his wife and partly about his long-lost daughter. And as he's talking about these two, he's talking about how pretty women are the fuel to really get the blood pumping, if you know what I mean. And Turpin also says this, but he's referring Turpin is referring to the arousal his daughter brings him. I'm really glad this musical ends the way it does, is all I'm gonna say. I actually wrote as a side note after this part of the musical, I'm like, kill him already. Just as Sweeney's getting the razor up there to slit his throat, Anthony runs in and ruins it. And as Anthony runs in, Judge Turpin recognizes him, and he's like, "You fraternize with the likes of him? Then I shall never be in this establishment again." Sweeney Todd is very angry about this and yells at Anthony to get out and to not come back. Sweeney is at this point that even though Sweeney Todd already had the murderous intentions in mind, he was a man set for revenge. it's at this point that he snaps. He fully loses it. He becomes the full-on psychopath that would become known as the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. He promises to murder all of the men of London who come into his shop. The lighting is... I didn't have a lot of stage notes in this, but this is one that I absolutely did, because it's at this point they have Sweeney Todd lit with a spot on him, but purposefully throughout they keep Mrs. Lovett in darkness. She sees the psychotic snap of Sweeney Todd, and even she is unsettled by it. The song ends, and Lovett, she is thinking about what to do with the body of Pirelli. How are they going to get it out of there? Todd suggests later that night they'll take him out and they will bury him. But then Miss Lovett shows that she's just as psychotic, if not more, than Sweeney Todd, as she suggests very giddily that they bake Pirelli's body into a pie. And she hints around at it at first, and then Sweeney Todd realizes what she's saying, and he gets this huge smile on his face, and he laughs, and it's just so disturbing, but funny at the same time. The way that they do it, they make you laugh even though what they're talking about is horrible, horrendous. And they dedicate a whole song into the different types of people pies they will make. And the song, of course, is called A Little Priest. Jesus. Todd and Lovett have a good old time, is actually what I wrote for the end of that. And that there ends Act 1. A short intermission is then sorry, my thoughts, I have a problem like that sometimes where I'll kind of zone out. The intermission begins. Act 2, Scene 1 opens the same way that the prelude ends, with the loud screech hearkening the return to the pie shop / barber shop of Mr. Todd and Mrs. Lovett. Pirelli's former servant boy, Tobias, is now the salesboy for Mrs. Lovett's meat pie shop, and he begins describing Mrs. Lovett's meat pies as some of the most delicious in London. Oh, that's so disturbing. It's so funny how he does it, too. It's the irony that makes me laugh about it, because otherwise you couldn't laugh at this sort of thing. It's just so horrible. But the way Sondheim writes, he makes you get the irony of it, of the way the people are reacting. This cuts into song 18, called God It's Good, or God That's Good. The song is mainly about how great the pies are, which is mightily disturbing, considering this is in the midst of Sweeney Todd's killing spree. The beggar doesn't even get up to the pie shop before getting ran off by Mrs. Lovett. Mrs. Lovett discusses how the business is the best it's been. Again, that's horrible. In typical Sondheim fashion, there is no room for the actors to breathe. It's very fast-paced dialogue. It gives no rooms for mistake or unnecessary breath. It's just very quick, fast paced. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lovett runs out of pies and has to have Sweeney give her a drop-in delivery. Sweeney says he will stomp 3 times, and that will let her know to open the hatch, and then tap 3 times whenever she's done for him to close the hatch. He drops down a supply of body parts, which he immediately bakes into pies, and once again sells out. As Mrs. Lovett thinks her business day is over, she sees a customer enter Sweeney's barbershop and realizes her day has just begun. For she now has fresh supplies. Her words, not mine. That's horrible. The scene ends as the man awaits entry to Sweeney's shop, and Mrs. Lovett turns her sold out sign back over to show the menu. Horrible. Horrible, that is. Scene 2 begins with church bells. The lights come up on the barbershop and a fire escape in London, kind of juxtaposed to each other. On one side you have Sweeney Todd, as always in his barbershop, and on the fire escape is Anthony. This is song number 19, the Johanna reprise. The song opens with Anthony once again singing about his love for Johanna. Johanna, however it's pronounced, my bad. As he sees another customer, or as he sings, another customer enters Sweeney's barber shop, and Sweeney begins to sing about his daughter, and prepares to murder another customer. On one hand, you have the love song between lovers, Anthony and Johanna, and on the other hand, you have Sweeney Todd singing of the regret of his daughter's absence. The beggar woman sees the smoke coming from the meat pie shop, and even through her lunacy realizes that there's evil, or, as she puts it, mischief afoot. When we then see Johanna's perspective, and see that she has been locked up in an asylum by her father for refusing to be smitten with her father. I hate that I wrote that. But then again, it's true. It is during this song that we for the first time in the musical, actually see Sweeney bring the blade across the throat. Every time before this, he would raise the blade up and it would cut away, or he would get the blade out and it would stop and the scene would end. This is the first time we actually see him slit someone's throat and we see the blood come down. It is these murders that undercut Sweeney's cries for his daughter. Immediately, he cuts the throat of 2 men who enter his barbershop. Immediately after, a man and a woman enters his barbershop, and he's kind of off in his own space at the time. And the man sits down in the chair, he gets ready to shave, and he looks behind him and he sees the woman, and he gets really frustrated. He gets annoyed about the fact that the woman's there because he can't cut this man's throat. Anthony has a confrontation with Beetle Bamford, who informs him that it was him who took Johanna to the asylum, and that if Anthony tries anything to get her out, he will be arrested. Anthony ignores his threats and is chased off by officers, now seen as a wanted man in London. The scene ends, and the very next scene begins with the same very loud, unsettling screech that harkens back to the pie shop. Scene 3 is set inside of the pie shop, In the very back of the pie shop, in Mrs. Lovett's little living area, Sweeney Todd is sitting in a chair, contemplating his next murders, as Mrs. Lovett sits collecting her money and doing her paperwork for the shop. Tallying up her profits. Again, horrible. She tries to make conversation with Sweeney, though it seems pointless as he just keeps ignoring it. Sweeney tries to find a solution to get Judge Turpin to come back to his shop. This is when song number 20 kicks in, By the Sea. Mrs. Lovett begins to sing of a future that she wants with Sweeney, and talks of how she wants to live by the sea. Did I just say the sea? I'm sorry. She wants to live by the sea. Sweeney acknowledges her, saying, "Whatever you say." However, it's clear that he's disinterested in what she is saying. Himself over and over again, like I said, saying, "Whatever you say." Mrs. Lovett continues to go on and on about how she wants to live by the sea, and Sweeney pays her very little mention. He continues to think of revenge while she's trying to think of love. Very disturbing love. It gets way more disturbing by the end. I didn't even realize what the end was until this point. Anthony enters the pie shop and tells Sweeney that Johanna is locked in an asylum. This gives Sweeney an idea. He knows of a wig maker who works at the asylum, and tells he begins to form a plan to get his daughter out of the asylum. He tells Anthony to ask for a wig from Mr. Fogg, and to describe Johanna's exact hair color and hair type. Sweeney then goes to extensive detail about all the different types of hair texture and color of the blonde hair that his daughter has, or the yellow hair that his daughter has. Goes into excruciating detail. Anthony then repeats him just a bit afterward, kind of like, the old row your boat. As you get through with one, another one chimes in, row your boat, row your boat, kind of like that. Anthony again repeats what Sweeney says. Like I said, it's a tongue twister classic, another Sondheim trope, where people are talking over each other and there's no room for error. That's one of the things that I think is great about Sondheim, but also is terrifying, is that in a lot of Sondheim shows, there is no room for error. If an actor makes a mistake, it can ruin an entire song. And while that's like that for most musicals, Sondheim's in particular, it will throw the entire rhythm off by one small slip up. The company then chimes in, echoing what Sweeney and Anthony have just sang. Sweeney tells Anthony to kill if he has to free Joanna. The company then goes into song 22, The Letter. And what the song is about Sweeney Todd sending a letter to the judge, saying that telling him what Anthony is doing, and that the judge should meet him at the barber shop, and that is where Joanna will be brought by Anthony. I believe this is set up for Anthony to get killed as well. Scene 4 opens with Mrs. Lovett sitting on the steps of Sweeney's barbershop. She is knitting clothes for Tobias, the servant boy, who has been there since Pirelli was killed. The boy reveals that he has seen the evils committed by Sweeney Todd. Song 23 is called Not While I'm Around. Song number 23 begins the servant boy singing how he will protect Mrs. Lovett from the evil of Sweeney Todd, blissfully unaware of the fact that Mrs. Lovett is fully aware of what Sweeney Todd is doing and encourages him to do it, and is profiting off his evil deeds. The boy professes his love to Mrs. Lovett. She comforts him, but it is very clear that she is uneasy with what is happening. In a moment of stupidity, Mrs. Lovett pulls out Mr. Pirelli's purse and begins to peruse it. The boy recognizes the purse and confirms his suspicions about Sweeney that Sweeney Todd had a hand in the murder of Mr. Pirelli. Mrs. Lovett tries to talk the servant boy down, Tobias down, going as far as to echo the boy's own words, singing, "Nothing's going to harm you not while I'm around." As she begins to sing, the music starts to become unsettling, with this new undercurrent cutting through the original melody. Another sign of the mastery of Stephen Sondheim. The boy has pretty much uncovered the murder of Mr. Pirelli at this point. Lovett desperately tries to talk him down, to little avail. It is at this point that the musical actually acknowledges the boy's name, Toby or Tobias. Lovett offers to take the boy to bake the pies, which makes Toby very excited. However, it would appear that there are some ulterior motives at play with Mrs. Lovett, as Mrs. Lovett locks Toby in the basement to cook pies as Beadle Bamford enters Mrs. Lovett's pie shop. Mrs. Lovett attempts to dissuade him from checking the baking area. Sweeney Todd enters the scene right as Mrs. Lovett has told Beadle Bamford that Todd has the keys to the bakehouse. Todd offers to give Mr. Bamford a free shave. Mrs. Lovett undercuts the horrendous scene with a parlor song that she starts to play on her instrument that she has in her living area. And as her parlor song cuts out, we are taken back to the basement to see our poor boy Toby taste testing a pie that has probably been cooked wrong, as he finds first a hair and then a fingernail. Right as he's about to open the door, try to open the door and leave to ask Mrs. Lovett a question about the pies, we see the bloody corpse of Beadle Bamford slide down what I can only assume to be a coal chute that is being repurposed for the trapdoor into the basement, scaring and probably scarring poor Tobias. We immediately cut back to Mrs. Lovett singing her parlor song as Sweeney Todd enters, saying triumphantly, "It is done!" Only now does Mrs. Lovett inform Sweeney Todd that Toby is in the basement and has just been witness to the gruesome murder of Mr. Bamford. The scene ends with Sweeney and Mrs. Lovett going to take care of the poor boy, Toby. This begins the final sequence of the musical. In Scene 5, Anthony gets into the asylum with Fogg, and Fogg threatens to cut Johanna's hair. Anthony pulls a pistol on him, however is unable to fire, and drops the pistol. It lands in Johanna's hand. And, as Fogg approaches with his scissors to stab Anthony, Johanna fires, killing the mad wigmaker instantly. As the two escape the asylum, so do the rest of the inmates. This leads into Song 24, City on Fire. In the song, the company sings about how the inmates are rampaging through the streets, and now, multiple times throughout this song, we hear the loud screech. showing that the lunacy has completely broke out. The beggar woman reappears, stating her fervent belief that there is mischief afoot in the barber shop and the pie shop. She realizes that Beetle Bamford has gone missing. Johanna hides in the case that Todd keeps his dead bodies in, as the beggar enters Todd's shop. Todd tells the woman to get out of his shop, and when the woman refuses, he slits her throat and shoves her down the chute. Todd and Judge reprise, the judge makes his way up the steps, and Todd tells him that Johanna is waiting outside for them, that he will give the judge a shave before he goes out to meet his soon-to-be bride. Note, Johanna is still hiding in the case in Sweeney Todd's shop. Todd and the judge reprise Pretty Woman. Johanna overhears the whole thing and is witness to the very events that happen next. Todd compares their tastes in woman. Todd, knowing that he's about to get revenge, or the revenge he seeks, reveals that while he may look slightly different, that the judge should recognize him. The judge takes one good look at him and yells that he's Benjamin Barker. And as he realizes this, Todd shouts his name to the heavens, Benjamin Barker! And he slits the judge's throat. The moment that we'd been waiting for. Beautiful. However, Todd, still never having met his daughter, Johanna, sees her get out of the case that she's hiding in, and not knowing that she is Johanna, nearly slits her throat. Luckily, she escapes. Todd goes down to the basement to find Tobias and collect his final killings. However, upon looking at the beggar woman, he has a realization that made me literally yell, "Oh my God," at the screen. That the beggar woman is actually his long-lost wife, Lucy, who Mrs. Lovett had made him think was dead. Upon learning this, Sweeney Todd, overcome with rage and grief, begins dancing with Mrs. Lovett, and in one felt spin sends her flying into the oven, locking her in there to burn to death. Todd is alone. No one left who loves him, and the one that he still loves sees him as a monster. His daughter sees him as a cold-blooded killer. Now, Sweeney Todd grabs his deceased wife, kisses her one last time, and as he holds her, he reprises Barber and his wife. Tobias re-enters. Sweeney Todd holds his wife, and he realizes that Sweeney Todd has killed his wife. He walks over and he picks up Todd's straight razor, and he talks about all the harm that this instrument had done, and that it would only do harm one last time, as he grabs Todd by the head and slits his throat. The demon barber of Fleet Street slumps to the floor, dead. Stagecoach driver arrives with Anthony to see Toby holding the straight razor, still preparing to grind the bodies that remain. The musical ends with a reprisal of Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. What a journey to go on. Just, what can I even say about this musical that hasn't been said by people already? In my opinion, it is the best macabre comedy that Sondheim ever produced. It is so dark, twisted, and yet so funny and just charming in the way it goes about things. Sweeney Todd is a musical of many things. Murder, betrayal, heartbreak. One thing it is not is a bad musical or a bad movie. I personally think that I personally hold Sweeney Todd as my favorite Halloween musical that I have seen to date. And that includes the others that I've listed earlier, Little Shop, Rocky Horror, and I may be alone on that statement, and I may be alone on that sentiment, but for me, it's beautiful. So, that's my final thoughts on the Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. I give that musical 5 straight razors out of 5. Now that we're done with our big feature-length review, what's next? Well, tell you what's next. Next is our local spotlight. And this local spotlight is for Stage Company of Carbondale. This weekend, October the 8th, 9th, and 10th, and next weekend, Thursday, October 14th, Friday, October 15th, Saturday, October 16th, and Sunday, October 17th. There is going to be the musical, or not the musical, what am I saying? The play, Shakespeare Abridged. It is the complete works of William Shakespeare, abridged, revised. Tickets to get in are $15 for adults, $10 for students who are able to provide provide some sort of ID showing that they're a student. And Thursday's show, all tickets are $7. That is discount night. On all Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays, the shows will be at 7:30 p.m. And all Sundays, they will be at 2 p.m. Another local spotlight I'd like to give a shout out to is to Pyramid Players, who are currently working on their production of White Christmas, which is really not my musical to tell you about. My buddy, or my co-host, Nathan, actually can tell you more about that next week on the show. Last but not least, the Stage Company of Carbondale is also currently working on their Christmas musical, A Christmas Story, which will be on December 3rd through the 5th and the 9th through the 12th of 2021. While that may be still a little ways down the line, I always would like to mention that. Also, at the end of this month, Rocky Horror Live is coming to Marion Civic Center. Let me try that again. Rocky Horror Show Live is coming to you at the Marion Civic Center, presented by Skyline Creek Productions. It's I think their first outing since the pandemic has begun, or since last year at least. I think they did maybe a Christmas production, and that was it. That has been our local highlight spotlight of the week. Okay, so to finish this off, I would just like to say thank you everyone who has supported this venture, who has supported me throughout my time on YouTube, in theater, all that. Thank you. God bless. Y'all are awesome.